and I hope that's okay. So basically today we're going to be talking about three different or four different questions, and it's basically focused around exploring architecture of the future and the context of business resiliency. And business resiliency in times when we have a pandemic like COVID-19, I think it's more obvious than in those times when most of us that work in any type of security function are struggling because people associate the business function not as security, but more of like a technical function. So let's start off with, since we're talking about the pandemic, what's your working day looking like? And we'll start with Francisco. What does your working day look like since the lockdown? Has it changed much? Is it still the same? Is there a lot of remote stuff that you're doing? Tell us.
Hi.
Hey.
Yeah, my working day hasn't changed much. The main difference is that I'm living my life in half an hour, 1 hour blocks. It makes challenging for resting. For example, I work in a tall building, and those 5 minutes between meetings are very helpful, waiting for an elevator to meet someone, to talk to someone about different topics, and that changed a lot, right? The other difference I've been noticing is to catch someone available, right? Roam around the office, find someone to talk about something. Now it's harder because we're all remote for 3 months now, and that's the main challenge, the person-to-person contacts, talking about something. Hey, by the way, I found this, what do you think about it? Now it takes like a week to get that answer, and it has to be a formal invite or whatever. So
okay.
It's not the perfect, but it for me personally didn't change much, only these small details and topics. Yeah.
Okay, so then, Mr. Hu, what about you? Has your life changed since the lockdown? Yes or no? And if so, how, from a technical perspective or from a security perspective?
Thanks, Mike. This is Hainan speaking. So I have to say things changed a lot after the COVID time has started. Their pros and cons has changed. First is, since everybody is working remotely, then people have to book the calendar. So everything is getting more, organized and also calendar driven. But of course, the big con for us is, especially for security people, because there are two cons. One is there are certain type of security activities needs to be physically done in my process I'm defining. For example, we play card games of threat modelings. And now we have the card over there, but we can't do it online. And another thing will be communication. Especially when we have the roles like architect or security officers, we need to show us to all different departments. And this is what I call the management by workaround. And once everything's digitally, everybody is occupied fully on their calendar, is really too hard to actually have the visibility to security people. That might cause some communication issues, especially regarding transparencies of business decisions and also the potential impact of security changes we want to have to the company. So this is the challenge that I think so far we need to really find tactical or strategical methods to deal with.
Okay, interesting perspective. What about you, Stefan?
Hello, Mike. Nice to be on. Well, I have to say, for me personally, my daily business life hasn't changed too much. I don't have to commute to the office, but since I'm very often looking at our enterprise from the outside, from the internet and unsecured networks anyway, I can do that from home. What has changed, and what my other two colleagues have already mentioned, is that I'm missing the ear on the ground, so to speak. So whatever is happening in the company, very often you get a whiff of that by standing at the coffee maker or something like that, and that has gone nearly completely. And so I think that is one of the things we should focus on to get into that line of communications again. Maybe use any kind of internal resources better to get ourselves to be in the involved early on.
Okay, great. So we'll stay with you for a second and go to the next question. So what are some of the new skills and the approaches that the architect of today, and probably more interesting of the future, we'll have to harness to take advantage of the current and future business environment, or specifically if we're thinking about how this pandemic will change the way we do business, and we will be working more remotely. So I think two of the things that both of you gentlemen, you and Mr. Hu or Hainan has talking about was the teamwork, also that physical connection to people, the ear on the ground, which is one thing, but what are some of the other skills that the architect needs to know besides the teamwork and those aspects?
Well, I think skills that any architect needs to have nowadays are also the soft skills, the being able to translate any technical requirements, any things that come up, or threats, or anything that is very deeply technical, explaining that to the board, explaining that to higher ups, explaining that to other people in order to make the point. Because in the past, security was pretty much, for some companies, it was a closed kind of closed cell. It took money, and they said they would make things secure. But as all of us know, in the previous 10 years, this has changed a lot. And nowadays we have to tell what we're doing with the money we're getting. And if we can't communicate our needs and why this is a very good thing to have, then we won't get the budget. So communication skills, I think, are really absolutely important for any architect of the future.
So
as well, yeah, as well as thinking about what the whole working from home does to data. For example, if I have a work laptop at home and securely connect via VPN to my company network and then can browse the internet for information that I need regarding to my job, or connect to a cloud service that I need to work with, and if that is a pain to do because the work laptop is kind of slow and the internet bandwidth is used at my company, then I think many people will start using their private devices, and this should be in the modern threat models.
Yeah, that's also a trend that we're seeing as well. Hainan, what about you? Can you confirm that? Do you see slightly different things? What's your view on that?
Yeah, for me, for sure, a communication skill is essential for all types of security professionals from my point of view, because for me, the skill of required for security professional is 50% technical, 50% communication. Because one people cannot really make much impact if they cannot really communicate well with the rest of the company regarding security works. That is why I believe I'm totally agree with Stefan regarding the communication and soft skills about this part. And I think in the current time, especially once everybody is facing the new patterns of working, and this kind of time might last for a longer time than unexpected period. And I think the architect should also have a skill regarding how can they self-reflect regarding the current scenario, and also being able to define process that needs to adapt with the current scenario. For example, how can they find technical way to get themselves, regularly communicate or present to the board and the rest of the company, even though everything's remotely. And if everybody's calendar is fully occupied, how can they able to contribute to the company, let's say, calendar strategy or policies according to from security architect point of view, right? So this is something I believe is also very important skill for the architect.
Francisco, what do you think in regards to the 50% technical skills and 50% communication? Do you agree? And if you don't agree, what is more of the things in line to what you see?
No, I totally agree. The architect is not only the architects. Everyone needs to have a strong business skills, not as strong, but at least soft skills to talk with people, because we're a long way away of those guys in the bunker that don't talk with anyone. Now in our days, we give our face forward. We're being questioned by people everywhere. We're being questioned by the board, by the CEO, whatever, right? So I think strong communication skills are very good and helpful for the company. It will bring value to the cybersecurity space. If we have someone that doesn't know how to communicate, we will lose budget for sure, because he will say, give me money. Why? Because we need it. We have a virus coming up. We need someone that understands business and can translate technical to business, right? It's a different language, completely different one. So I totally agree that at least half needs to be half technical to business skills. Yeah.
I think that's an interesting point too, because since the pandemic, we've also seen that the classical approach that we take, whether it's architecture, whether it's security, tends to focus a lot on the technical processes and procedures and what we need to know. This is just for everyone in general, but it doesn't focus as much on the business side of things. And I think the interesting thing, at least from my personal perspective, being the CEO of an intelligence company, is we originally thought that giving people the opportunity to access all the data that we had in regard to risk intelligence would basically be enough for the market. And what we're also discovering in the last few years more and more is that either people don't have the time, they don't have the training, and they need the information in a way, shape, or form that's very digestible so that they can highlight the value very quickly. And what that also means is that we're moving away from these classical mentalities that you buy a threat feed or something like that, and then everything's resolved because you have a team of people that do that. But specifically in the SMB space and a lot of bigger companies nowadays, they don't really have the time anymore to concentrate on those classical intelligence functions, and they were never really trained in that. So, I mean, the business skills and business communication as to the value and what kind of data are we collecting and what are we using that data for makes a lot of absolute sense. So I think that also means the third question that we have is, I guess we can say that the answer is yes. Do business skills matter in the current environment, and they will matter more in the future? So I think that's not really a question that we have to really ask based on the results that we have so far. I think we could absolutely definitely say that we need to concentrate much more on the business side of things. And what that probably means is that architecture and these processes will be a combination, a very strong combination of a business process that has technical components, rather than in the past, it's a technical process that has some business components. So, Hainan, do you agree to that assumption, or do you have a different view on that?
Sorry, you're talking about me, right? Hainan.
Yeah. Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
sorry.
Okay.
Hainan.
So I don't have much opinion regarding this one because from my point of view, the technical regarding these fields, I don't feel there's much change regarding the business, because in the end, the technical and technical solutions for the company is still needed for the architect to define for it. So I don't know what are the two's opinion about it.
Okay, so Stefan, what do you think?
I think that is a very good point, because in the past, the technical realities have been on the minds of the engineers and not the business realities. So the introduction of proper processes, ITIL, and all those things that are commonly regarded as being boring are a necessary integral part of security nowadays, because you can't really have security without them. And that's another skill an architect should have, to be able to have those processes in place, to design processes, and maybe get rid of the, well, this is very controversial, but maybe get rid of the technical mindset that 100% security is possible, and get to a point where processes and the people behind it are able to deal with a situation where security is breached. Instead of saying we should have had 100% security, well, you won't.
Yeah, I think that's a very critical point too, because some of the ways, shapes, and fashions that we sell the value of data is focused on, well, here's your feed, now you can digest the information and now use that information to defend yourself. But I mean, when we're paying a lot of money for a threat feed, and patch management, vulnerability management, secure development is not a process that's been matured in an organization, it's much more difficult to say, okay, well, we're going to buy the feed for $1 gazillion, let's theoretically, but I mean, the way we do our entire architecture internally in the company is still broken. And it's interesting, back in 2011, when ITIL was the buzzword, a lot of the architects started training and learning about ITIL, but nowadays, everyone's focused on cyber this and cyber that. And a lot of people are forgetting that, okay, well, even if you do have some solution that's supposed to solve all your problems, it can only solve as many problems as you're not dealing with processes and procedures. So if you don't work that way in a certain shape or form, it's not really going to help you that much, or minimal at best. Francisco, what about you? Do you think that's an accurate assessment too, based on ITIL and the business process side of things and procedures, that they are, if not more important, at least just as important as security, and also for the architect to understand that?
Yeah, certainly. By the way, while you talk about the threat intel feeds, right? My experience is that they're almost useless because they just dump too much information. So, for example, in my company, we have threat intel offices that translate those feeds into business. So everyone gets an email, pretty email with, here's the issue, here's the risk, please do something, right? So like we went a little bit ahead and understand, hey, this is useless or it's not useful for business people, so let's translate it. Regarding ITIL and everything, yes, but I think we need to have within the company a common framework for architecture, right? In one side we have enterprise architecture, the other side we have security architecture, and they're not always talk the same language, or we have different views on whatever. And I think the company needs to understand, and right now we're working on it, by the way, to have the same view, to have the same goals, because sometimes they push to one side, sometimes we push to the other side. So we need to have a common understanding where we want to go and a common framework to work on, because sometimes enterprise architecture, although we touch each other projects, it's not the same, and we need to have a common understanding. Yes, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so then we'll get to the last question, and then I'll start in a second with Stefan, and then we'll go on to Hainan, right? Hainan.
Right.
Okay, got it this time. Sorry about that. Mea culpa. So we've had a discussion for a long time, especially last year, I think, when we started this. Some of the discussions that we had focused around cloud. Is cloud something for Germany, yes or no? What is the value of cloud, and is it going to be much more important in the future? Now, I think part of this answer is there because since we moved into remote locations, we found that some of the cloud-based resources have to be there and in place in order for us to leverage a remote workforce. So my question is, was this discussion about cloud and on-premise, is this debate now finally over? And the second part of that question is, what does this mean if it is or isn't over for the future architect?
Well, to be honest, I don't think that discussion is over. I know that the cloud has, many people would like to migrate to the cloud and go away from on-premise. Some companies would like to stick on-premise, with on-premise solutions. And there's no doubt that a lot of services that are in the cloud, from Office 365 and Salesforce to others, are there and won't go away. This will never, in my opinion, go back to be an on-prem solution. But also, I don't see some on-prem solutions go to the cloud just because of the current situation quickly, because there are many more questions than just whether you should do it. There's also the question, how can you do it, and how can you do it in a safe way with European, German regulations? And so I think the discussion is not going away. It might have gained some momentum thanks to the current situation, but it's nothing that will be, the migration to cloud won't be done within a few months. I don't think so.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting aspect too, because some of the customers that we are dealing with are critical infrastructure. And some of them are under the notion that when you have outsourced your stuff to the cloud, that you're no longer the asset owner and you're no longer responsible for security. And a lot of times I spend a lot of my effort during the day in these discussions talking to executive leadership that, well, actually you do own the asset. It's just not in your data center, it's in someone else's data center, which means the risk goes up. So I think the discussion, do we or don't we use cloud? I think that part of the discussion is over. Cloud is here to stay, but do we move everything over to the cloud? Like you said, that's still a debate that depends from company to company. And again, Some of that is also based off of what we talked about before, ITIL. If your processes and procedures, they're well defined, then it's easier for you to migrate into that how question into the cloud, right? If you don't have that in place, then it's much more difficult. Hainan, what about you? What do you think? Very good points.
So for me, the on-premise and on-prem and cloud debate shall never end. But from my point of view, it really depends on the business of the company and also regarding which type of benefit can company get from cloud. So I do experience several companies, they refuse or even move back from cloud simply because of cost factor. Because some of the business of the company, for example, they're doing the tracking services and it's simply just too expensive to host everything on cloud. They do this on-premise. Security sometimes doesn't really play a very critical role on the business decisions for the company to choose between cloud and on-prem, right? So this is something, but of course, I feel like there's an interesting factor that people should think about, especially now in the COVID side, is now we might have worse physical security. And if we have lack of physical security, then how is the physical security of the data centers of on-prem look like? It is going to have some impact for the companies to think about migrating to cloud because there will be a dedicated resource and let's say promises from the company to actually do more better protections of security of their cloud data center instead of the one on-prem, right? And this is the aspect I think is also worthy to raise up to aware that by the majority of the companies.
Right. I think those are very valid points, and we do tactical security and quote unquote physical security as well, because these are components that belong to the security processes and procedures and approaches, just like everything else does. And this is a thing where a lot of these cyber companies completely forget that, well, security is much more complex than you're making it out to be. It's not just about threat feeds. It's also about supply chain security. So I think part of the discussions that we're seeing now, and we've been talking about this for the last 10 years, is supply chain security has to be integrated into everything that you do. So every time you outsource a process or procedure or a piece of technology into the cloud or whatever you want to call this, the question is always, okay, well, what does the supply chain look like? How do I ensure that it doesn't impact negatively the business if something unexpected happens? That's part of risk management. And then how likely is that risk going to happen, right? And I think that's part of the topics, especially in much of the smaller companies that we're looking at. They completely forgot that side, that risk management, that supply chain is absolutely a part of security, just like tactical and physical security is. Francisco, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I strongly agree. Supply chain is a major topic because we're only secure as they are, right? That's why I normally, like in architecture, I like to use the zero trust model, but it gets too expensive, right? So regarding clouds, I'm a strong believer, but it's super hard to secure. It has been using most of my time lately because we simply don't know how to secure. For example, if we start deploying a data center in the clouds, infrastructure, easy. We have our standard controls, we have everything. Now let's go for a native app or a PaaS solution or a SaaS solution. That's a headache because we don't control anything. We just put our databases in the cloud and hope for the best. And that's why I am a strong believer in the zero trust model, and those third-party solutions, we need to really understand the model, how they operate. And sometimes companies are very fuzzy about it. They don't tell us how they do it. They just say it's secure, or we use the latest encryption can have, and it's not enough. So I think cloud and companies and vendors need to work better.
Okay, great. So we're going to wrap up this session now. I want to thank all three of you. It was a fantastic discussion. We've unfortunately run out of time. It's definitely a topic that we could discuss the entire day. I know at least I could. And I think some of the things that we've understood was that business skills are very critical for the architects right now and for the future. Understanding the business and also the processes and procedures whether it's vulnerability management, whether it's patch management, whether it's how to manage assets. And then lastly, the discussion around cloud is by no means done. That cloud is here to stay is a fact, but that it remains to be seen that the more processes and procedures are matured and integrated into companies, the easier transitions will be to cloud. And some of the topics that we didn't talk about maybe for the next time that we do this next year is when we move over from one cloud provider to another, it's also, at least in some of the cases that I've gone through for some pretty big contenders out there, a nightmare. And again, that also hinges on the fact that if we've managed the processes and procedures, they're there, they're documented, everybody knows them, and our outsourcer can understand and has the technical resources and business resources to do that, will be much more successful in the future. So with that, thank you, gentlemen. I really appreciate it, and namaste.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, everyone. And we got some nice comments. Peter Beckman is saying he thinks also ITIL in the future will be more out of scope for many IT organizations. There's a number of really positive comments. Please, when you make your comments, can you label it all panelists and attendees so that we can all see? But yes, thank you very much. Let's give our panel and Mike a warm round of applause. If virtual, I think some people are using the clap icon. I guess we got to figure that out. But thank you very much. It's great to welcome you. Now I'll see you in the audience, and I'll see you all very soon. Lovely. Thank you very much.